An experiment is an improvement on the correlational method because we can assign cause and effect between two variables. So in an experimental method, one variable is manipulated while the other variable is observed and measured. And our goal with an experiment, the express goal, and the reason this is an improvement on correlations, is because we can express that cause and effect relationship. It attempts to control other variables too from influencing the results, and we call these variables confounding variables. So what happens? The researcher manipulates one variable. In this case, they manipulate what researchers or rather participants are exposed to. The researcher manipulates one variable by changing its value from one level to another. In an experiment that your text talks about somewhere else in the text, the researchers manipulated the amount of violence by giving one group of boys a violent game to play and the other one a non-violent game. A second variable is observed to determine whether the manipulation causes changes to occur. That second variable, the one that's measured, is called the dependent variable. The variable that's manipulated is called the independent variable. Also, the researcher must exercise some control over extraneous variables that could influence the interpretation of the outcome. And if these extraneous variables were too many and too poignant, we would have trouble knowing whether or not it was actually the independent variable that caused a change in the dependent variable. Let's take an example. I may have mentioned this before, and I think I did. I volunteered for an experiment over 20 years ago in the late 90s in which I was to approach an actor playing my roommate and ask this actor to wash dishes that she had neglected so that I might have company later. Half the participants were in my group, and they got exposed to an actor playing the roommate that gave us a flat no. No explanation given, but when we asked that person to wash the dishes, they just looked at us in a very unfriendly way and said no. And our instructions were to keep pressing the matter, hopefully trying to get them to cave in for a couple of minutes. This was stressful, and as you can see, as we mentioned before in passing, this actually caused a spike in our heart rate as measured by a blood pressure cuff that was being worn on our arms. The other group, the control group, actually got a yes from the roommate. The roommate was cooperative and docile, and of course heart rates were commensurately lower. So what were the independent variables here? The independent variable was whether or not the roommate said yes to the request, and the dependent variable was the heart rate that was observed when they were exposed to these two conditions. That's measurable, and certainly this cuff that we wore allowed the heart rate to be measured. So let's recap those terms. An independent variable is the variable that's manipulated by the researcher. In this research, the independent variable consists of two or more treatment conditions to which participants are exposed, which is the word we use these days. The independent variable consists of conditions that were manipulated prior to observing the dependent variable. So they knew in advance, before I got there, what I was to do, how I was to be treated, that I was either to be given a yes or a no by the roommate. The dependent variable is the one that's observed to assess the effect of the treatment, in this case, heart rate. So I observe someone's heart rate in order to know whether the independent variable worked, the yes versus the no. Was the no frustrating? Was the no that they got actually caused the central nervous system to spike? And in this between participants design, you could consider the yes group to be in the control condition. They didn't receive the thing that was provoking. They received no treatment, or they received something neutral, which was cooperation in this case. The purpose of a control condition is to provide a baseline for comparison. The ones in the experimental condition, which was the one that I was in, got the treatment. I got the unfriendliness. I got the refusal. I got the smugness. I got the lack of cooperation that caused me to have a spike in my central nervous system, if you will. So when we come back, we'll speak of some of these confounding variables that researchers try to control for.